Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this call. Before we start, we'd like to just do a few housekeeping reminders. Can we please ask everyone to keep your microphones on mute when you are not speaking? And also, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out through the chat box. And also for all the attendees here today, video is optional. We will also be using breakout rooms during the session today, so just please be mindful. And if at any time you experience any technical difficulties, please feel free to reach out through the chat box and we will try to assist you. Now I'd like to pass it over to Shiv to take us through the rest of the call. Thanks, Shiv.
Thanks, Don, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to a discussion forum like no other, and I'm delighted that you all are here to participate in this event. From the engagement, the interactions, and the message of support, there is definitely momentum to push our industry into a future that until now we've been imagining, or what has been in vision documents for many companies. Now you must be thinking, or you must know what transforming the industry means, but you must be thinking what the ground-up approach means. And the reason for putting the ground-up approach was to say there is enough knowledge, there's enough capacity, enough skill within the industry to push it towards a change. And I referenced an article that was written by Jon Davies, the CEO of Australian Constructors Association, some months ago on is now the Uber moment for the construction industry. And as I read that article, one thing I felt was that the advent of Uber wasn't through a industry reform. It was a group of people who decided on a particular idea. The mass population took on the idea and it just took off. And I was thinking to say, okay, could this be something that we do in our industry? And then a hot example now is the Bitcoin. I mean, it was started some years ago, I think 10 years ago, by a university professor, but the world very gradually adopted to it. And now there's so much more hype, conversation around it, and it has picked up momentum. So I know in our industry, we've got a lot of technologies, a lot of ideas, a lot of innovative ways of doing business, managing people, looking after well-being, etc. So if we were able to embrace some of the good ideas that are there, we'll be able to push our industry to a point, or push the governing parties of our industry to a point where we can drive some real agenda. Now, I'm not saying that the government doesn't have a role to play and the industry associations don't have a role to play. I think there is a role that they have to play, but we have to play alongside that. And I think we today, through conversations like this, can give the government confidence in terms of the transformation agenda we are pursuing. The government also happens to be a customer, so I think just like any supplier, we have our role to play. I'm joined by my industry colleagues here, Matt, Jerry, John, who is the CEO of Australian Constructors Association, and Lee Tilahun. And they are passionate as you and I about transforming the industry. And I'm looking forward to your thoughts and contributions. Our aim is to make sure we engage everyone and get thoughts from everyone in the forum. So if you would like to contribute, there will be breakout groups later on so we can capture your thoughts and new ideas and push this conversation forward. I now invite Jerry for his opening remarks, and I should give a quick background. It was Jerry's post that got this conversation going and eventually led to this online forum. And then we had Mackey come in and share some more of the content, particularly what was being published in the Australian Financial Review at that point in time. But before I give it to Jerry, just in terms of the agenda, after Jerry, we'll have Jon Davies, who will set the scene with some of the work he's been doing and his thoughts on the industry. We will then discuss the hard conversation, which Mackey will introduce to us, and then we'll break out into groups for about 30 to 35 minutes to discuss. And then we'll capture the summary from the breakout groups, discuss next steps, and close this session off. We're expecting to go an hour, but given that we started a few minutes late, we might just tip over the hour mark. But without any further delay, I'd like to invite Jerry for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Shiv. And thank you all for attending after work and giving up your time to engage in this discussion. So just a quick introduction to myself. I'm a 15-year civil engineer myself. I'm the founder of Brightside Consultants. So, as Shiv rightly said, I started this discussion, and Shiv was very kind to organise and get us together to start a discussion and a bit of a brainstorm tonight. So to give some context into why we are on this event today, 2 weeks ago I posted Australian Financial Review article titled 300 billion infrastructure blitz at risk from skills, raw material shortage. It was written by Patrick Durkin and Jenny Wiggins of the ARFU. It reviewed over 7,000 reviews, 45 likes, and 11 diverse comments that started a conversation that brings us here on today's event, which is titled Transforming Australia's Construction Industry, a Ground-Up Approach, kindly organised by Shivendra Kumar, and co-hosted by Jon Davies and Mackey. Thank you, gentlemen. Just to really get into the reason I posted the article, and it was really to highlight such an ambitious delivery of projects that's in line with my work, which is in the resourcing and HR. Delivering 300 billion worth of state-backed infrastructure projects is a hugely ambitious and exciting prospect for Australia. And it's the main reason for why I created my own company, Brightside Consultants. But what really concerned me as a civil engineer who has worked on 2 big metro projects myself, Crossrail and also in Hong Kong, is that these projects I mentioned are going to be built by local and international contractors who assembled their teams internationally and by local means. And as Chief Executive of the Infrastructure Partnership Australia, Adrian Dwyer, said in this particular article, Australia's national infrastructure market operates in an international context, and it's absolutely appropriate we have a national level discussion about the skills and resources required to deliver a historic infrastructure spend in which we are currently in and have a futuristic view. COVID-19 and the restrictions on travel, as well as the reduction on skills visas being awarded, and as a result being activated, so they cannot travel to actually come to Australia to activate the visas, the 189s, the 190s that the government give out as skilled visas. I see this as a huge problem in the context of attracting international skilled labour for these infrastructure projects. From the national level skilled professionals, they are already working to the max at present on the planning, design and construction delivery of existing projects. So I guess from my post, I wanted to highlight this and get the thoughts from my network, hence posting the article. I see it daily in my agency, the two-sided coin, employers' expectations and the market supply that is shrinking week by week because of COVID. The skills and experience required is not in abundance in Australia right now. Some people may argue that they are putting up posts where they get many applications, 10x for example. But in reality, if you look at the Department of Employment, Skills and Small Family Business website, it's only 2 or 3 applications that actually meet the satisfactory requirements. So I look forward to an open discussion tonight to really getting not just in discussion of skills gaps, productivity and skill shortages, but also what the industry feels is needed to transform the Australian construction industry going forward. So thank you, and I'd like to send a welcome to Jon, and he will set the scene in the next episode of this tonight.
Thanks very much, Jerry. If we could have the next slide, please. And maybe even the next slide after that. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you, once again, for participating in the discussion. As Shiv mentioned at the start I believe quite strongly that this is potentially construction's Uber moment. This is the long-awaited opportunity or long-awaited chance for significant change in the construction industry, an opportunity to make our industry far more sustainable. And why is that? Well, this slide sort of summarizes the opportunity. We are a very significant industry, as in construction. We're the third largest industry in Australia. We employ almost 1 in 10 of the working population and contribute anywhere between 7 and one of the important points there is the thing in the top right-hand corner, in that for every dollar that's spent constructing new infrastructure projects in Australia, there's a $3 kick on to the wider economy, which is why governments in times of recessions look to spending on infrastructure to lead the economy out of recession. And it's why the government is really relying on our industry right now to do the heavy lifting. And this is the opportunity that we have now, is that the government is relying on us to deliver this work. There are concerns around the capability, capacity, and skills of our industry to do that. There are desire to leverage the social and economic benefits of this construction. And there are also concerns around productivity and how do we maximize our bang for our buck of all this money that is currently being spent. So government is very keen to work with industry. Industry is very keen to work with government and help them achieve, but on the basis that work is done to address the sustainability part of the problem. So that's what I'm keen to talk about today, and to hear everyone's views on what needs to change, why it needs to change, and how it needs to change. So with that, I'll pass over to Matt to start the hard convo.
Thanks, John, and welcome everybody. So this is the start of what we hope is going to be an interesting half hour of discussion and debate. Talking to Shiv earlier today, one thing that's quite apparent in terms of the number of people who've registered for this is it's a good mix across the board. People like ourselves who are kind of hosting this today, who've been in the industry 20 plus years and plenty of experience across a number of different sectors, all the way down to people starting their career, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think to have that spectrum as part of the discussion is useful. And one thing that I've been finding, particularly over the last couple of years, is that the generations coming through have got more opportunity to change the industry than we've ever had before. So it's good that we can welcome everybody into this discussion. So one thing we want to try and bear in mind with this discussion is that there are a number of different aspects to a number of different things that are kind of holding the industry back at this moment in time. So the kind of question that we're putting to each of the groups is, what can individuals and industry players do about changing the industry and overcoming the challenges that it's currently facing? And then part of that discussion really for today is really understanding what those challenges are. I think many of us already have a good understanding of what they are. Some of us may be looking at particular aspects. Maybe it is about procurement, maybe it is about government engagement, maybe it is about digital and the use of data, maybe it is just down to pure old industry relations, contracts and approaches. So there are a number of different ways we could take the conversation. So that's how we want to try and drive the conversation today. We're going to split out into the different groups. We're going to have almost like a table that we're going to use as part of our discussion. And we're not going to try and solve the problems today, because that's going to take longer than an hour. What we're going to try and do is just try and identify what the challenges are and which ones we think we should try and focus on first. So as Shiv just put on the screen there, that's the question we're ultimately trying to answer today, because we are planning to be potentially further sessions and further interactions that we can have further down the line following today's session. So the question is, what's holding the construction industry back from progressing? Okay, hopefully that's relatively clear. So Don, do you want to move us into the groups?
Yes, so we will open the rooms now, everyone. So you will be asked if you want to join the room. Please click yes. and then we'll be sending through messages throughout the session to remind you of how much time is remaining.
All right, thanks everyone. I think everyone's back into the main group. So we'll now go to the breakout room leads and get their feedback on what you've been discussing, at least a summary of it. So Don, if you could go on to the slide. Yep, perfect. So first I'll invite Matt. Matt, if you can cover what your group has been discussing.
Thanks, Shiv. I was just gathering my thoughts and then you threw me under the bus, so I'll have to think a little bit quicker. We had a really good back and forth conversation. The main theme, and to be fair, it was like wrestling a herd of cats at times, because we tried to make sure that the way we wanted to take the conversation was what can industry change, rather than try and put the blame at a client stall and government stall. Unfortunately, the kind of recurring theme is that you can't divorce the two. We can drive change to a certain extent from an industry perspective, but we do need the clients and government to acknowledge the change that needs to happen and help drive it themselves, rather than dictate and mandate. So the kind of thing, I mean, there's plenty of things that we talked about, and we're still in the middle of allocating things to different aspects to the matrix. But the kind of two that we kind of kept coming back to was about risk and pipeline certainty, which is very much still in the client domain. But I think some of it is about that client industry education, so that they understand the importance of acknowledging what that pipeline looks like and creating the certainty around it. And a number of things that kept coming back to, we talked about the UK construction playbook, and how that's an effort by the UK government to try and drive that change across the industry. May not cover everything that we'd like to see, but it certainly steps in the right direction. I know Jon Davies is certainly an advocate for it. And we talked about a number of things about entrenched attitudes and industry skills and construction being an individual sport. And we think something like a construction playbook may get us part of the way there, at least in terms of the discussion. So I think one thing that we'd like to focus on is, can we get an industry group together that could almost focus on preparing something like a construction playbook? It doesn't necessarily have to be a construction playbook, but something along those lines that we can almost sign up to and take to government. And this isn't just a contractor-led thing or a consultant-led thing. I think this needs to be a blend and a partnership, but take it to government and take it to clients and say, this is what we'd like the standard of the industry to be, and this is how we'd like to approach it. So they're probably the two main kind of themes that came out of it.
Thank you, Matt. That was really insightful, and I like that the statement that you can't divorce the two, because I was in your group for a while and I could sense that. I'll move over to Jerry for feedback from his group. Jerry.
Thank God I wasn't up first, because I'm I'm just getting my thoughts as well. So we had quite a few on the contractor side, and we had some client and industry representatives as well, as David and our participants just closed out on. So really looking at my edited question sheet, what we started off talking about was productivity through technology adoption in relation to, it was more of a long-term progress in relation to adapting types of technology. Either paperless was an example of using SWIMs and types of on-site productivity. Everyone has iPhones, iPads, etc. So a long-term goal would be that now it is widely being adopted, but just having it as a new normal of that technology, paperless, would be a great way to adopt technology as a long term, but also a quick win as well, I must say. We also spoke about, experts in their fields, and attracting experts to come into an industry or a company or a project and implement best practice and really drive the culture of innovation. We all agreed that culture was a long term. I put it down as a quick win, but I was kind of referring to maybe an alliance where you have new teams involved, and culture could be set out very, very quickly. But I was corrected on that. Some quick wins again, as I said, was leveraging experts, bringing them in, and getting them to implement best practice, be it technology, be it leadership, be it other aspects. Looking here as well, we spoke about off-site manufacture, DFMA. We spoke about procurement strategies, risk sharing between the government, contractor, different stakeholders, playing the piper to KPIs in relation to compliance. Alliance, we talked about alliance delivery, how successful some of the contractors on the call have found creating a culture within an alliance, and that type of delivery strategy. Just looking at my list here. A low priority was design and planning, because we all agree that Australia has some great designers. That's a low priority, but I guess it's the actual delivery side that's lagging in relation to time and cost blowouts. And then the attitude to as I said, over budget and over time within the industry, that they should be really pushing that we have to meet the deadlines, we have to meet the budgets. But from one or two of the contractors on the call, their clients, or even the contractors themselves, acknowledge that, you know, we're going to go over budget or over time anyway, but that needs to shift, and productivity would be a direct result. So they're just some of them. And in relation, sorry, to my last point, in relation to the client side and the project managers on the call, there was a question raised, you know, how can we deliver on government compliance measures, but add real value in the process and make it a worthwhile exercise? Coming back to my point in relation to just playing the fiddle to requirements by the government in relation to compliance, etc. So yeah, that's a few points.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of points, Jerry. So thanks to you, and to your group. And I was just looking at the smiles on when you mentioned paperless and technology. There are a number of tech players in the group, and I could see them beaming with joy for a moment. Yeah, I'll move over to Lee for feedback on Lee's group now.
Shiv, I would just like to point out that completely ironically, we're actually over time. Right, we've actually delayed the project.
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't charge a registration fee. It would be over budget as well.
Right. So we had a really rich conversation, a broad group, quite a mix of from different parts of the industry, and some really good points that came out. It's almost very difficult to deprioritize any of them. So I'm kind of just going to go through, and I'm going to put them into sort of quick wins and long term rather than deprioritize or low priority, because I think all of them are quite important. So in terms of the quick wins, I mean, there's quite a few shared themes from the other two groups. So there's effectively 3 or 4 buckets, right? So one is around the whole risk, commercial structures, and anything associated with sort of collaborative contracting, that sort of thing, was a quick win. The other one was digital technology for collaboration, information sharing, generally kind of digital technology to provide more transparency in the performance of projects, and also ownership of project data by, you know, and also then being input into the digital and technology. The third aspect, so one is sort of the commercial contracting and risk. The second was technology. The third bucket was, and the quick wins that came out of it, is diversifying the skill base. So we cross-fertilize from other sectors so that not everybody kind of looks and feels like us. So we should we be having, you know, people from the technology sector being a core part of our industry, so which was an interesting point. Other sort of, which was, so we saw the lower priority, but they could also be high priorities, elements around having the right kind of data on environmental, so for materials, right? So understanding the environmental impacts of materials and being able to share best practice so we can lower the carbon footprint of construction projects. Another interesting one is that we don't celebrate success very much. So we always kind of the construction sector takes a lot of beating. We also kind of all the time talking about what we can do better because we're self-critical by culture, but we don't actually celebrate our successes a lot. And I think that can do a lot to raise more out of the industry, which I'll come to over the long-term levers. And last but not least, in terms of on this side, is element around building a model project to set up, to deliberately use to basically setting up, being a model project essentially, to use it to demonstrate best practices, right, as a showcase. So similar to what was done in the UK with Heathrow and Project 13, right? So thinking about it that way so that it becomes the best example that others can use to move forward. So you're not taking a risk across everything, so you're actually piloting it on something and then scaling it up, which I thought was a pretty good, we all thought was a pretty good idea. Now, what are the big things, right? The big elephants that we need to deal with, but not easy to kind of shift over the short term. But one of them is trust, right? The general trust between the different parties in the ecosystem is a big part of what needs to be fixed to enable the industry to move forward. And also, if you're really going to fix contracting, trust is a big part of, if that's not there, then everybody's going to run to the contracts at the first opportunity. The second one was a cultural shift. Again, these are related, they're not mutually exclusive, but the whole kind of industry culture is something that needs to shift. But again, like everything in culture, takes a long time to do so. The third was around the owner sophistication on project outcomes, defining and owning project outcomes. So really knowing what they want to get out of it and leading by example to get there. The fourth was around diversity. So we talk about diversity of skills, but we were talking about diversity of gender backgrounds. So because diversity of that kind of thing also brings diversity of perspectives into the industry. The last two is an element around clear and shared alignment of the ambition of the industry, which was we all thought was quite interesting. This thing was about, this whole discussion was about what's holding the construction industry back from progressing. But do we have a clear and shared alignment of what success looks like for the industry? When we're talking about sort of trying to come up with levers to get there, how we first of all align, does everybody agree on what success looks like for the sector, which we thought was quite interesting. Last but not least is a discussion around the role of the consultant to step the game up to be able to influence, because the consultant is the closest advisor to the client and project owners. Project owners have the biggest sort of platform to be able to influence how the industry shapes up. So the role of the consultant in terms of being able to influence project owners and the outcomes better, I think was the other long-term element that was discussed. So a few shared themes and a few new ones that came out of group number 3.
That's fantastic. Thanks a lot, Lee. Good insights, good discussion. Now, part of the reason for putting this question to the forum was related to, so when Jerry put out the initial post and then Mackey put out his post, as I was reading up the responses, I saw that there were people who were talking about diversity, there were people who were talking about project delays, there were people talking about some good projects, and we were all in different areas, looking at different areas from the same article. And I thought, okay, the first thing it would be good for us to understand is what is the real problem that we are trying to solve, or what are the real problems. And it's really interesting to see how through our own experiences and various backgrounds, we've been able to put a lot of these together. And all of us have got different perspectives. And that sort of leads us to the next activity that we'll be working on offline. So if we go to the next slide, what we are going to do is consolidate the information that you have put together. So all the groups were working on the same question, the same template, and we will look at the top topics that have come up, and we'll do a poll that it will come your way on LinkedIn. And the idea is to involve all of you, but those who haven't been able to participate, to rank out, to have a rankings, to rank what are the top issues. So I'm hoping that you all can contribute to that, and we're able to then at least identify what are the issues that we need to be focusing on first. Following on from that, we're planning to run interactive event series where we'll ask industry leaders to workshop their thoughts with participants and create a common definition of a sustainable construction industry, share best practice, identify gaps, and establish partnerships for change. Now, the reason for taking this approach is we're not starting from a zero base on many topics. There's a lot of work that has already been done. So if I can take the example, and I keep referring ACA, that they've got a framework that has already been built. So it'll be good for them to put out something, have or present what they have done in relation to a particular topic. I know Mikhail's on the group and he's been doing work around the cultural change. So if an industry group or an agency has already done some work on a particular topic, let's get it to this forum. There'll be an opportunity for that particular topic to be presented, and then for the participants to engage in that with the intention that we can all take away certain things that we can implement in our businesses. And the same goes for diversity. There might be organizations that have embraced it very well. So how could we do that? So, but the first thing is to work on the projects that matter first. So how can we solve the challenges that our businesses and our industry is facing, or basically in the soonest possible time. So that's the activity that we'll be doing. Also, the intention is to keep this group alive. And amongst all the facilitators that we have today, we could not agree on a way to do that. So you'll soon be receiving a survey in a few days' time. And one of the questions will be, how do you suggest we keep this group alive? Because the intention here is to maintain that momentum. We're not here just for the 2nd of February. The intention is that the thoughts and discussions we have when we gather on February 2nd, 2022, after maybe 30, 40, 50 discussions, we can say, hey, we've actually turned the dial. So how would we do that? And I want us to all put together our thoughts on how we will be able to do that. And that's really, if we look at this is, we're keeping the theme of the ground up in these. So we really want your thoughts to come through this, and for the respective communities, industry groups, the government, and whoever, to basically see that, hey, you know what, we've got a skill base that is able to drive this particular agenda. I would now hand over to Jon for his closing remarks, and then we'll finish off this discussion. So Jon.
Yeah, look, thanks, Shiv, and thank you all for participating today. Certainly the breakout group that I was involved in, that Lee was chairing, was some really good discussions in there, really heartening discussions, because really to achieve change, we need a lot of people that are passionate about change, and it's really good to see so many people that are passionate about change, and how an initiative like this can come together so quickly, and have 40 people turning up at this time of the evening on a midweek night is pretty impressive. I think if I were to summarize the summaries, again, that's quite heartening from an ACA perspective, because a lot of the key issues seem to align very much with what we as an association have come up with. So we're talking about culture, we're talking about technology, talking about trust, productivity, commercial risk. And as Shiv says, we might talk about this in some depth in a future session, but essentially the ACA has come up with their 3 pillars of sustainability, which are the culture of the industry, capability, capacity, and skills, and commercial frameworks. And I think a lot of those issues that have been raised today fall into one of those 3 categories. So they are the real important elements for a sustainable industry. But I think it's very important that we align ourselves on what is a sustainable industry, what are we trying to achieve as an industry. So there's some really good conversations that came out of this. And what I'd like to sort of say to wrap up, I mean, we're very keen, as Shiv said, to try to keep this conversation going, and to explore some of these issues in greater detail. But what I would say is that really we have, I believe, and I strongly believe this, and I was a bit flustered at the start because I got my daylight savings wrong, and I thought this meeting was starting an hour later than it was, so I was a bit flustered at the start. But I'd just like to repeat essentially the opportunity that we have as an industry right now. We have a really good opportunity, a once in a generation, as corny as it is to say that, opportunity for change. And you can all play your part in achieving that change. We all want to see change. We all want to improve our industry. And it's through things like this, and through being passionately involved and contributing to the debate, that we will see that change. So thank you very much again for participating today, and really look forward to continuing the debate when we align on how we're going to do that going forward through the rest of this year.
Thanks a lot, Jon. And I also take the opportunity to thank everyone who's taken our time to attend this. Please spread the word. The more people get involved in this, the better it's going to be for the industry. A number of you have been sending messages of support and been contributing through emails and LinkedIn messages. I appreciate that. Please keep that coming. And I encourage everyone to keep the conversation going. I'd like to thank Matt, Lee, Jerry, John, of course, for their contributions, and also special thanks to Megan and Don for assisting with all the aspects of this event today. So we'll all be in touch. Look out for the LinkedIn poll in a few days and a survey that will follow. And we will keep you posted on the future events. And I'm hoping that we can get the same level of support, if not more, from you and your connections as we begin to change the industry. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.